Welcome back, viewers, to Insight. You're here with Daniel Hayes and
Andrew Blackburn.
we are talking about drugs. We went through some of the effects that it has on folks and why people maybe use it, even after being warned of all of those. But let's talk a little bit about where these drugs are coming from, right? I mean, you got a lot of people in America using drugs, particularly in impoverished areas. You know, this is generally a correlation between poverty and, well,
Except for the wealthy businessmen we mentioned.
right. You know, maybe it's just
the perception of certain drugs have certain prevalence, maybe among certain communities, maybe.
You know what? I think you're absolutely right, Andrew. I think some people are just not getting caught doing them or being punished for doing them. I mean, if you look at the jails, I mean, they're flooded with
Racial
drug
minorities,
violations.
or mostly minorities.
Mostly minorities and mostly for drugs.
And which is disproportionate with their actual rates of use and possession. Actually,
Yeah.
if you look at how it should be, there are far too many people from minority backgrounds who are in jail than would be, assuming everything else.
Yeah.
Being constant. So.
Well, I mean, I
certainly have a racial dynamic to it,
I would not argue that there are a lot of problems with our justice system and the military prison money-making complex that keeps a lot of people employed and making money. And that's really what drugs are about, too. It's about making money. I mean, when you think about drugs, most of the drugs that we get aren't coming from America. So how are these getting in? Any insight into that, Andrew?
Some of it's coming from Latin America, a lot of it probably. And as a result, particularly in Mexico, there's a lot of violence associated with the drug trade. People who are down in that area, particularly around the border between Mexico and the United States, they describe it as resembling Chicago during the Roaring '20s, which, for those who don't know, that was during Prohibition, where alcohol was illegal, and there were a lot of gangs who were involved in the sale and smuggling of alcohol. Same situation here, where you have people who are involved in drugs. It's illegal. They are smuggling it, they are selling it, and they are making lots of money because it's illegal. It's a high profit margin. And these people, one, they don't have a nonviolent mechanism to settle disputes. If you're from gang A, you're from gang B, can't go to the court and decide who has turf because you're both doing something illegal. So what does that leave you? It leaves you the violent decision. And a lot of times, innocent bystanders, they get harmed. A lot of times, extended family get harmed. Even people who have nothing to do with the drug trade get harmed as a result. And that's not good, I would say.
Certainly not. I mean, we've seen here and abroad how drugs ruin the home, it ruins communities, it ruins entire countries in some situations. So, I mean, we can point to several instances where American politicians have allowed drugs to come in. I mean, we can talk about the relationships in Panama with George Bush Sr. with Manuel Noriega, things like that.
Sure.
Pablo Escobar. So, what is in it for these politicians that say, hey, go ahead and let these drugs flood into our country? I mean,
well, they try not to. If you see the actual voting records, I mean, we've been fighting a war on drugs for some 40 years now. Which has obviously failed. I mean, you look around and you want to talk about when to wave the white flag and say we've lost.
Here's the thing. I don't think it's really a war on drugs. And the first instance I recall about the war on drugs was during the Reagan era.
Sure.
And Reagan was one of the most awful presidents we've ever had. And it really scares me that a lot of members of the Republican Party are holding him up as one of the greatest.
Well, he has a mythos about him, right? He has this aura of
I can't see it. I don't see anything good.
Well, that there's a myth about him that a lot of people want to accept it, about the
Well,
regulators.
they want a champion, everybody wants a hero, he's dead and gone, he was horrible while he was here, and now they want to say, he's responsible for the booming economy during the Clinton era, as opposed to saying Clinton is responsible for the booming economy during the Clinton era.
Or politicians in general aren't ever responsible for good things when they happen.
He does not control the economy, stupid. And that whole trickle-down philosophy, which is sort of a modified version of Milton Friedman's economic plan, it's proven not to work. I mean, the disparity between the rich and the poor has only increased. But that's not what we're here to talk about, necessarily. What I was getting at is that war on drugs I first heard about coming from the Reagan era, right?
Right.
And here's where it started. In poor black communities, drugs were already rampant, okay? And it was destroying the communities. And that was allowed by the FBI to, take out black revolutionaries, such as the Black Panther Party. They wanted to make everyone complacent and just basically take away the revolutionary spirit and disrupt the society and whatever terrible things they could do to black people in general. But here's what happened as a result of that flow of drugs. Particularly in LA, you have the gangs, the Bloods and the Crips, and they began selling drugs, and it was a very lucrative business. So what happened was these Bloods and Crips started to become pretty well off, and they crossed that sort of invisible line. LA is a very segregated city, into the very prosperous areas such as Beverly Hills, and then they see each other there, right? Then there's violence, there's bloodshed. They go to Disneyland, and then they're kicking up dust over there, and they're bringing violence into the protected, predominantly white, wealthy areas of LA. And at that point, there was a war declared on drugs, because now it's affecting the people that we care about. So nothing has really gotten better. They just protect certain enclaves. So
that's certainly part of it. I mean, Nixon was the guy who first declared illegal drugs public enemy #1, and officially sort of began what we know of as the war on drugs, because that's where you have the DEA and other beginnings of the militarization, I should say, of drug policy in the United States.
And he was a crook.
Yeah, contrary to his own opinion.
Right.
I guess he took one to know one, I suppose, when it comes to criminals, right? But yeah, he really started it, and what basically the theory behind the war on drugs is that drugs are bad, and so they should be illegal, and we need to stop people from using them.
But when has when has America ever stopped allowing something just because it's bad for the people?
As far as I know, no place anywhere
has... Why do they allow high fructose corn syrup
right,
to be fed to your children?
Right, and so originally the first anti-marijuana laws were passed because they thought respectable white women would smoke marijuana and then have sex with Chinese people and Mexicans. I mean, that's the literal sort of justification the senators and congressmen at the time gave. They said, this is what's going to happen. We can't have that happen.
Right.
Which goes back to your point of protecting certain enclaves from alleged,
What was that
danger.
crazy movie, the marijuana film?
Reefer Madness.
Reefer Madness,
right.
Oh, God.
So, you have that, and what the practical impacts has been for the war on drugs is that you have an increasing militarization. You have police who believe themselves to be soldiers in a war, which, as a police officer, you're there to protect and serve.
Not in this town, buddy.
Right. It becomes an us versus them sort of situation with the police and how they view the public. Which is why you have repeated stories of dogs being shot and the wrong home being raided, and families sat down with their heads to the floor and guns at their backs because they think that the police think they're involved in some drug trade.
Sounds like Iraq.
If you be victim of one of those drug raids, you'll probably think you are in Iraq. So that's what you kind of have as the practical impact, and not to mention money being spent. I mean, we're talking about trillions of dollars here, which doesn't count the assets that have been seized, which is a multi-billion-dollar business yearly in this country. So you have those problems, and on top of all of that, on top of civil liberties being violated, people being harmed, money being spent, assets being seized, often under dubious legal methods, right? Drug use has flatlined. It's not going anywhere. It's the same as it was when the war was declared. So I mean, you see it as you can have all the intent in the world to not, to have people not do drugs, but the only way you can convince people is by word of mouth. You can't convince people with threatening them and bullying them into not doing something.
I mean, can they really have a war on drugs, or we start wars in other countries? Can we just go bomb the poppy fields and
Are drugs going to come to the table and sign a peace treaty?
And
surrender.
We have these satellite images. We can find anyone, anywhere, right? I mean, certainly hundreds of people growing illegal drugs, in some other country. We can find that out.
They can't stop drugs and other weapons and other things from getting into the prisons. So I don't. And those are pretty locked down places, I imagine.
I don't think it's an issue of can't, but choose not to. I don't know everything, but I think if we as a country really wanted to, we could go into some other countries and just drop some thermo bomb to burn up, cocaine fields or poppy fields. I'm not saying to do that. I think a lot of people in third world countries are doing the growing of this, because America or other Western forces have come in and stolen their resources and corrupted their politicians, and they're still bearing the shackles of colonialism.
Well, and the profit margin is there. I mean, if you're a farmer and you've got a choice between dedicating your land to, let's say, the poppies or cocaine, right? You can do that, and that has a certain profit margin, which is pretty high. Or you can go and farm corn or wheat or something like that, where the profit margin is pretty low, and particularly in countries where
or maybe the cartels would just shoot you and take your land
anyway. And particularly in countries where it's corrupt, there's a lot of corruption, where if you do farm something above board, you're going to be paying a lot in fees and registration costs and all these other things. You might choose to go the illegal route.
Why did the president of Mexico have over $50 billion? I mean, it's like, that's obviously corruption.
So you have to, really pay attention to, some of the external issues involved in the drug trade and drugs in general.
So, okay, we're not politicians, Andrew. We don't own any planes or bombs. As regular citizens of America, just like our viewers, what do we do to stop drugs? Stop people from using drugs, right?
In my opinion, you just have to talk to people and say, what, this is going to harm you, and if necessary, just choose not to associate with people.
Yeah.
Use your power of association, which you could say, look, you can choose to do drugs, but the price of that is going to be the loss of my friendship or the loss of my support and some other,
What if they call you names for doing that?
You'll have to be the bigger person. You have to be confident enough to stick up for your own philosophy and your own thoughts, no matter what they are, whether it's about drugs or anything else.
Even if they call you ginger balls?
Even if they call you ginger balls.
Wow, that's a tough call. You gotta have a lot of fortitude to withstand that.
Absolutely.
This is another episode of Insight, brought to you by Octet Solutions and Blissful Blessings Events, a dynamic current media offering. I am Daniel Hayes.
Andrew Blackmer.
Signing off.